If this goes on, don't panic. Bringing hope to the world through speculative fiction.
Hello and welcome to episode 12. In this episode, we will be interviewing author Nadia Afifi. So Diane, how are things going?
For me, pretty good. Just quietly using January to catch up on a bunch of backlog projects that I have been meaning to do, like editing my book and, kind of watching South of the Border with a little bit of trepidation. But
Yeah. And so I was going to say real quick for our listeners, we are recording this within 3 days, of the attempted coup.
Yep.
And usually, these are a little bit offset with real time, so we don't always talk about real time stuff on here, but with that hanging over our heads, it's just likely to come up. So just so everybody out there knows, that's when this is happening. And if that stuff comes up a lot, you know why. So, as Diane, as you were saying, I've been really just too absorbed by the news to really do anything else.
Cannot blame you one bit. I'm very concerned about it. So we've discussed this on the show before, right? That I'm the voice of Cassandra. I keep going, guys, this is bad. Don't go do this. And then, oh no, it'll be fine. And then it happens, right? So we're exactly where I expected to be at the end of, about 5 years ago when I started going, guys, right? So just a word of caution. If they do not do some serious criminal prosecutions at this point, my Cassandra prophecies as a dystopian writer are that the next step is the Troubles in the United States. So be aware, be careful, guys.
Yeah, I'm with you. On that. On a less stressful note, I recently finished the second season of The Mandalorian, which was pretty awesome.
Oh, I haven't even started the second season yet, so don't tell me.
Well, let me just say this. In my opinion, so much better than the first season.
Oh, really?
I felt I really enjoyed the first season. And we kind of talked about this on our last live podcast.
We did.
But I had not finished the second season at that point. And I thought the first season was good. It was just fun. You know what I mean? It was just good, down home, Star Wars-y, awesome fun, right? It really didn't feel like it was super serious or was going anywhere, really kind of meandered a bit, which was kind of cool. But I think the way they wrapped it up in the second season and the surprises that they had really just made it a much better show.
Awesome.
And I think they had a few stumbles in the first season too, but
Okay, I've got patience for first seasons, right? The first season of Buffy was absolute garbage. The first season of every Star Trek that has ever existed has been absolute garbage. Okay?
Right,
they're garbage.
Right.
Then they find their footing in the second season, right? So I got patience with that in sci-fi shows.
Totally fair. I think, honestly, with most shows, even comedy, lots of comedy, like we watched Schitt's Creek, same way. First season, it was all right. It was good. But everyone kept saying, watch the second season. So we did. And it picked up. And, Brooklyn Nine-Nine, which I know is an older show we recently started watching. First season was pretty good. Second season's been better. It just, you just got to get through that first season.
Right. Fair enough. But I love the first season of The Mandalorian. I thought it was great. I'm a Western fan, and I'm a samurai movie fan, and I'm a Star Wars fan. So for me, it all came together, and I'm like, this is brilliant. And so I can't wait to see what happens in the second season.
Yeah. Hey, you all know that I'm a supporter of Dreamforge magazine. You might wonder why you should support Dreamforge too. First, understand that Dreamforge is a new kind of science fiction and fantasy magazine that is looking for hopeful futures in a time when it seems hard to find that. Second, check out their magazine. The illustrations are beautiful. Personally, I was very impressed by the cover of the 3rd issue. Additionally, they have top-tier talent writing in the magazine, like Jane Linskold, Dave Weber, and Mary Soon Lee. They also have new authors to discover too. And if you're like me and read a lot on the bus, they have a portal set up for you, so you can read the magazine on your phone or tablet. There are plenty of other reasons to check them out too. You can find them at dreamforgemagazine.com. That's DreamForgemagazine.com. Okay, so we should probably bring our guest on. What do you think?
We should, yes.
All right. So our guest today is Nadia Afifi. She's a science fiction author. Her debut novel, The Sentient, was lauded by Publishers Weekly as staggering and unputdownable. Her short fiction has appeared in the Magazine of Fantasy and Science Fiction and Abyss and Apex. And I will say, spoiler alerts probably on this episode, we will be discussing that novel. And she grew up in the Middle East, but currently calls Denver, Colorado her home. Her multicultural background has inspired her passion for exploring complex social, political, and cultural issues through a futuristic lens in her fiction. Wonder why we chose her. When she isn't writing, she spends her time practicing and falling off the lyra, I hope I'm saying that right, or lyra, hiking and working on the most challenging jigsaw puzzles she can find. So welcome, Nadia.
Thank you. Yeah, great to be here.
Did I pronounce lyra right? Lyra
It
or
is lyra, actually. I didn't learn that until I started learning lyra.
Oh, good. So I got it right the first time, and then second guessed myself, and then yeah, then mess it up.
Pretty normal. Pretty normal.
Never second guess.
Right?
That's right.
And so the most challenging, let me start that again. The most challenging jigsaw puzzles interests me because we have interest in jigsaw puzzles over here, especially challenging ones. So what jigsaw puzzles do you find challenging?
Generally, I go for really large piece jigsaw puzzles, like, 1,000 is kind of conventional and standard, and I can knock through those pretty quickly. But I have done a 6,000 piece one. I've done a 9,000, I think is my record. And I actually own, believe it or not, an 18,000 piece one that I have never completed in full.
Oh, wow.
It's about the size of a ping pong table. And someday when I get a ton of free time, I will attempt that again.
Right. We did this one really cool one years ago. I can't remember how many pieces it had. It was probably around 1,000, but it was like a maze, and it was the way that it was designed. It was kind of like it was all the same geometrical shape, right? Like all the shapes within it were like the same geometrical shape, but there were like little mini scenes within each geometrical shape. It was the coolest puzzle, but it was so hard.
That sounds diabolical.
It was pretty awesome.
Yeah. Anything with like repetitive patterns or like a big sky that's all the same color is going to be challenging. So yeah, if I'm going for a smaller piece puzzle, I'll look for that and go, yeah, that'll give me a little heartburn, but in a good way. So.
Right. So why don't you tell us your origin story? Like how did you get into writing? Why science fiction, fantasy kind of stuff, all of that.
Yeah. I mean, I guess like a lot of authors, I've always been an avid reader and always had an idea, even as a young person, that I wanted to be an author and write books and all of that. And when I was younger, I kind of trended towards more like literary classics, and then kind of discovered a little later on, like around college, that, hey, I really enjoy sci-fi. And, kind of shook off that snobby attitude towards genre fiction that I think I was kind of raised with, and, discovered, hey, with sci-fi, you can actually explore a lot of complex stuff. You can make it very rich in terms of your world building, in terms of the themes you explore. I kind of read, like Octavia Butler and authors along that vein in college, and discovered, yeah, this is what I want to do. Then I, went to grad school, and then I kind of got into the workforce, and, had this great idea of, well, eventually I'm going to write a novel, but life kept getting in the way. And it wasn't until I moved to Denver, Colorado that I said, okay, fine. This is 8 years ago. I'm going to do it. I'm going to stop thinking about it and talking about it and just start writing. And, had this idea kind of in the back of my head that had been stewing for a couple months. And I just started, putting it down to paper, and started writing out a story, and the rest is history. Yep. And now I've written 3 complete sci-fi novels and working on the 4th.
Wow, congratulations.
That is awesome. Yeah, I hear you about the recognizing early this is what you want to do, but life and people, of course, give you all kinds of advice about, oh, well, being a novelist isn't exactly a stable career and so on and so forth. And then something happens and you're like, that's it. It's time.
Exactly. Yep. Yeah, no, I got that message. I think especially being, raised in a, Middle Eastern background, you're kind of told to be a doctor or an engineer. That's
Right.
kind of the stereotype and all that. And so for me, like novel writing, I was told, well, it's a hobby. If you want to do it for fun, great, but you're not gonna have a career out of it. You're probably not gonna get published. And you internalize that a little bit. And but I always held on to the dream and the hope that, oh, maybe I could be one of those authors who sees their book on the shelf. And it's been a surreal couple years, kind of getting to that stage. And 2020 was an awful year for most people, and it was, bad for me on the general scale. But becoming a published author was pretty huge, and it made up for a lot of the negative in 2020.
It's a Neil Gaiman quote that I like that I don't remember exactly, but it's like, oh, house burnt down, cat is in the hospital for dialysis, but I finished my novel, so it's a good day.
Exactly. It is spot on. That is how it feels.
And so I read you're also a P. Jelly Clark fan. Is that true?
Yes, and I know you had him on the show a couple episodes ago, and I listened to that one. That was great.
Well, thanks for listening. I was going to let you know that we had him on recently, and he's just brilliant.
He was cool. He was really cool. I really enjoyed talking to him.
I love his alternate Cairo world. I just finished a Dead Djinn in Cairo, and that was great.
I read them out of order. I read the novella first, and then I read the short story. But they were separate enough that it was easy to put them together.
Yep. We read The Haunting of Tramcar 015 in my book club. I think that was one of the ones I actually put on the list to read, and everybody loved it. And we all thought, we actually want a lot more of this world. I could just keep reading stories set in that version of Cairo, and I'm glad he's
yes, I cannot wait for that. That is definitely on my top 10 list for 2021. Top 3 list for 2021.
Still haven't made it there, but part of my plans for catching up on stuff that I'm behind on is catching up on the TBR list.
You can't see me, but I'm shaking my fist at you. You must hurry.
I will totally do it. It sounds so great. Like everybody who's read it is like, oh, really? I can't get enough of this world. I want to read more. So yeah, definitely it's going to happen.
Read it now because I'm telling you, I'm a slow reader, as you know. And I read The Haunting of Tramcar 015 in 3 days, I think. And the short story is,
nice.
It's a short story. So that took me, I don't know, probably two sittings.
Okay, as soon as I finish our review books that I have to read, that will be the first step.
So, oh boy, where to start with you, Nadia? There's so many themes that I picked up in your novel.
Speaking of our wonderful review books, by the way, I would like to say that Flame Tree Press puts out a really beautiful ARC. Their advanced review copy is lovely. It's very clean. So,
Yeah, they're great with covers too.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, scroll through like their website and all of their covers are just so good. And I was obviously thrilled with mine when it got finalized.
Yeah, it's a beautiful cover. It definitely communicates. Like, I haven't completely finished your book yet. I am about a third of the way into it, just where things start getting really interesting. And
oh yeah.
yeah, and I'm like, oh, this is so good. But yeah, it immediately communicates what's going on there. I've already caught on to the themes as well as the plot elements that are being referenced by the cover, and yeah, it's excellent. They're doing a great job, and this is a damn good book, I'd have to say.
Awesome. Thank you very much.
So one thing that I noticed right from the get-go was this kind of religion versus science kind of thing, right? Like this struggle between the two, philosophically and literally as well, of course, with Amira, coming from the cult and then going to the scientific city and then having to fight against them again. Can I ask you, how does your background inform your view on this struggle?
Yeah, so I grew up in the Middle East. I lived in Saudi Arabia for a length of time and then moved to Bahrain. And I'm kind of from two backgrounds. Mom's from Missouri, kind of a Catholic upbringing, and my dad is a Palestinian, Muslim upbringing. And my family is not, very religious, but I always grew up with it, peripherally around me, and took religion classes in school and all of that. And I as a non very religious person in a very religious part of the world, I definitely saw the dark side of it, and the danger of religious extremism. I mean, beyond what's in the news, just the way people internalize messages that come from religion and all of that. So it definitely kind of informed the theme of the sentient. Just what happens, like not that all religion is bad, and not that it can't be a net positive in the world, but the kind of dangerous extreme version of it, the effect it can have on individuals and society as a whole. So I wanted to explore that in a futuristic setting where it doesn't really tie into current events in an obvious way, and doesn't relate to a particular religion. I mean, the religion, the sentient, is very futuristic, and it's actually kind of incorporated scientific discoveries that have happened 200 years into the future, in my kind of world building.
I like that. I like that element very much about it, actually. You're not calling out anybody at all. You're just pointing out, the subject in general because of that element. I thought that was really well done.
Awesome. Yeah, I appreciate that. And I'm glad it kind of came across that way, because I definitely didn't want to point fingers at a particular religion at all. I'm not about that, but I like the idea that 200 years into the future, religion and faith probably will evolve and adapt, as it always has, to new discoveries. So like, I'm hypothesizing in the future we'll discover evidence of kind of parallel worlds and like multiverses and all of that. And so of course the kind of compound cults that have sprung up believe that there are good parallel worlds that are like heaven, and there are bad ones that are like hell. And if you're good in this life, it'll depend what parallel world you go to after death and all of that. And so they obviously use that as a form of social control and fear and all of that. And yeah, there are, like, obviously there is some influence with like the modern age. So like the compounds are set in the American Southwest, and years ago I read Under the Banner of Heaven by John Krakauer, and that went into like the fundamentalist Mormon compounds there, and like how isolated they are, and some of the practices that go in there. And I kind of like integrated a little, like some elements of that into the compounds, just with the location and some of like how they dress and how they live.
I like the fact that you also looked at the other side.
Yes.
Right? Like you're looking at, it's a concept. Okay, I'm a Wiccan, right? So I get into conversations about faith quite a lot. And one concept that I run into where I've agreed with them on some issues and others I'm vehemently opposed, right, is what I call religious atheism, right? And it's there's a certain brand of atheist that believes that any kind of faith is stupid. Usually it's a matter of having, like, in my general experience, they seem to have personal hate-ons more often than not for Christianity, right, or something similar, and they think all religions work like that, right? Because they tend to make broad generalizations about faith that doesn't include things like, they're like, well, you guys all believe in a magical bearded man up in the sky, and I'm like, dude, that's not part of my religion, never has been, right? And I don't believe in literal gods in the same way anyway. It's frustrating, right? Because there's a dark side there too, and the dark side generally being they think they're smarter than everybody else. They think they figured it out, right? And that sense of superiority, and I'm not calling out anybody in particular, I'm just saying I've seen this a few times, often on the internet, right? There gets to be this smug superiority that creates its own blind spots and its own atrocities. And I really like the fact that you're also showing that aspect in conflict.
Yeah, definitely. I think I definitely didn't want my book to have any black and white messages on that front. And I definitely agree with you on that kind of militant atheism where, I mean, I could name a couple authors, but I won't. But I think definitely even if I agree with some of the essential like points of what they're saying, the tone of it can be very obnoxious and patronizing, and it often doesn't account for the reality of how people actually live. And like growing up in the Middle East, I see that with a lot of the critics of like
Mm-hmm.
Islam is, they'll look at the Quran and they'll assume that that's how people live day to day in their life, and that that's how they follow it. And it's like, well, I grew up in Bahrain, very secular friends and family, they have a glass of wine in the evening, or just like, people who practice the faith in different ways. Like my grandfather was very religious. He prayed 5 times a day, but he was a very tolerant, chill guy. And he, the way they describe how people operate has no bearing on actual reality. And that's like the downside of, thinking you're incredibly clever and thinking, oh, I've read a book, I therefore know how it intersects with culture and society and all of that is just ridiculous to me. Tying that into the book, I definitely didn't want the world to be black and white. I mean, Amira definitely sees it that way at the start of the book. She's kind of escaped from like a cult, basically, kind of this conservative compound where she was going to be married off at a young age, kind of faced corporal punishment and all of that. So her frame is kind of very, religious compounds bad, modern city good, and her scientific community is good and all of that. And as the book kind of progresses, she sees the nuance that, her world is problematic in many ways when it comes to, gender stereotyping and sexism, when it comes to classism, and also, on the religious front, there is a kind of new age religion within the, scientific world and the city of Westport that, is different from the compounds. It doesn't have some of the negative elements, but it's also dangerous in its own way. It kind of tries to fill in the gaps of scientific knowledge, but they operate in a way that, if you read further into the book, you'll discover how dangerous they can be.
Oh boy, you touched on a lot of questions that I had there. Let's just go with the end part there. So you were talking about the two different kinds of religions that you show in your book. There's this new agey one that seems kind of harmless at first, right? But then kind of starts to appear more cultish as you get on. And then you've got the fundamentalist cult, right? Like, how do you see the mainstream religion falling between those two things in your world? And how does religion fit in a world that is more scientific and technological, do you think?
Well, I think religion and science don't have to be completely at odds with each other. And, the New Age movement kind of ties into that. But there's a character early on who kind of says there is danger in trying to fill in the gaps in our knowledge, in the sense that it can shut down lines of critical thinking. So hopefully I'm not giving too much away, but basically both religious movements have an opposition to human cloning. And it's based in kind of irrational beliefs. I mean, like, the more conservative fundamentalist element obviously doesn't like the idea of cloning because, they're threatened by the idea of, souls that are not created kind of quote unquote naturally, kind of through a new scientific process. And there's a gender element too, where it would allow kind of, female people to be able to reproduce without the aid of male people. And they're threatened by that element of it as well. And then for the New Age thing, they have their own kind of assumptions about how the universe works, and cloning doesn't really fit into that. And so they both kind of throw a spoke into the Pandora project for different reasons. But then again, I mean, you also see further into the book and then later on in the series, fingers crossed, that, there's, within the New Age movement, they're not a uniform group either. There's, different viewpoints. There's people who want to reform it. There are people who want to integrate new science into it. And then there's kind of the hardliners who are very, attached emotionally to their doctrines. So, that conflict kind of plays out throughout the series.
I love that. I love that very much. I have already grasped that, even though I haven't read that specifically in the book. Like I see the seeds being planted there. And I love the fact that your compound fundamentalist groups were all very different and had their own interpretations of what is essentially a very similar doctrine. And that's beautiful because that's how faith works, right? Mm-hmm. Everybody's got their own interpretation and they may not agree on some key points. And sometimes those conflicts happen over what seems to people who are not involved as the most minor of differences, right? But they're mm-hmm. huge for the groups who are in conflict over them, right? I think that's excellent.
Right. And yeah, like having beliefs is great, and especially if it gives you an anchor for how to go through the world and how to treat other people. And I think where it becomes dangerous, and I guess this is a lesson for the book, is really when it closes your mind to new discoveries and new ideas, or prevents you from changing your mind. I mean, I deal with this on a personal level all the time, where I'll become very attached to a position, and I'll always tell myself, like, what would cause me to change my mind? Like, what argument, what kind of research on, could cause me to rethink what I think I know? And if I find that nothing will change my mind, well, why is that? Am I too emotionally tied to something? And so I try to unpack that and unravel that.
That's an excellent thought experiment.
Yeah, that's a good bit of self-reflection there. I need to start doing that.
It's hard to do. And I think especially like in these very polarized times, and that's sort of another thing that comes into play in the sentient. Like one of the original kind of, I guess, sparks for the novel was, it was about 8 years ago. I think we were starting to see some of the political polarization that is really screamingly obvious right now, but, just people kind of in different ideological camps. And I thought, well, imagine like a future world where generally society is progressing in a more like, liberal kind of progressive direction, over time, we're becoming more environmentally conscious and so on and so forth. But there's a minority that feels left behind by that and, isn't really evolving with the times. And as they become less powerful, they become more extreme and dangerous. And that's like basically, I think, my future world has that element where you've got like generally a very kind of futuristic evolved society that embraces science and progress and all those warm and fuzzy things, but you have the compounds where they've kind of dug into the trenches and refused to engage with the outside world, and they're a minority, but they're a very dangerous minority, and that's kind of where a lot of the conflict in the book and the series comes to a head.
And I think science fiction comments on the current timeline instead of the future. That's a good way to explore our current world, because I think that's, in a way, what's happening with diversity becoming more and more prevalent in the United States. People who are against that are becoming more and more dangerous, right? Because they're losing power.
Right. I think we saw that this week,
Yeah.
I think we did. And, I like to say, oh, yeah, I'm watching things up here, over the border. But, it's here, too. At the same time that whole business was going on, there was a Trump rally in downtown Vancouver, which is one of our most liberal cities, right? So, that it spreads, right? Whatever you guys are doing, right, we'll get it like 5 years later, unless we, start getting on the let's stop this right now. Our conservative party has been deliberately adopting Republican tactics, and I'm at a point now where I'm absolutely not in the mood to tolerate it. Right? I'm not saying that
you guys are welcome to have Trump, though. When we throw him out of this country, you can have him.
No, thank you. No, that will be fine. No, no, I'm just, yeah, but I also agree with the whole having an attitude of intolerance towards the other side and not being willing to consider, well, maybe, have a moment of self-doubt and go, why will I not change my mind on this? That's a good idea too. Okay, I'm a very leftist person, right? And I've made that clear. But there is nothing unreasonable about the average conservative opinion. Most people have reasons for thinking like they do. I understand many of them, right? Because I've made a point of trying to understand it, right? And it's really unfortunate that there are those who, want to stir it up and make it dangerous, right? And this happens, in a variety of groups, right? Now, granted, there are those who are just intolerant, like there were literal Nazis in that crowd,
Right. Yeah.
Literal Nazis. Okay, we're done. We're not having that conversation. I'm not interested in finding common ground with Nazis. But, I mean, the average Republican voter is not a Nazi.
Right. I think there's a balance there. Like, being tolerant doesn't mean that we have to like treat all discourse as acceptable and things that we should entertain and listen to. Like, yeah, absolutely. Like the white nationalism, that that does not have any place in modern social discourse, and we shouldn't be giving a platform for it, and we shouldn't be listening with an open mind to their positions. But I agree with you that, not everyone who has leaned in the Trump direction falls into that category. And, I think also just from a point of view of getting through to people and having common ground requires like a different kind of tone and, being able to at least understand where they're coming from. Like, I may not agree with
Right.
it, but I know how you got to those opinions, and I can, talk to you on a level that you might be open to listening to me as well.
Thank you for expressing more eloquently what I was groping for. I appreciate that. That's great. Yes, that's what I was trying to say.
I'm sporadically eloquent. I feel like I go between I said exactly what I want to say and like, what are words?
Yeah.
What is a sentence? It's the same with writing as well. Like, some days I'll just be in the zone and I'll like write 20 pages of gold, and next day I'll struggle with a paragraph.
Yeah, definitely that
True
way
story.
in interviewing too. There's just in certain interviews where I'm like, wow, I killed that one. And then there's other interviews where I'm like, where was I even there? Like, what was I doing? Like,
I usually think I sound terrible in interviews, and I'm generally, I sound okay when I listen to them back. So don't worry, Alan, you sound fine, honestly.
You know how it is. Yeah.
I do.
So one thing I find interesting in modern science fiction is I feel like people are going back to a lot of tropes that haven't been explored in a while and kind of bringing them back up. And one thing that you kind of go towards, Nadia, is almost a form of telepathy, if you will, with the main character being able to read the can't remember the name of the woman who's having the clone baby.
Oh yeah, Rosine Hull.
Yeah, Rosine. Yeah. So,
Mm-hmm.
and in a way, she can read Rosine's mind, right, and see what's going on. And
yeah, perfectly scientifically explainable telepathy with modern science, which I like.
Yeah,
with a little bit of twisting for there's an element of technology there that we haven't discovered yet. I mean, that's well done. That's great.
Yeah, I've been reading this in some other, like Todd Thompson, who I constantly talk about, has some of that in his trilogy as well.
Rosewater. Yeah.
Have you read them?
I've read the first Rosewater book and I loved it. I need to get on the series.
Oh, brilliant. I just finished the third book, I don't know, 2 or 3 days ago. Brilliant. But my question for you was going to be like, why go back to some of these old tropes? I mean, did you do that on purpose? Was it just the idea that you had, or what was going on there?
The mind reading thing, I wasn't necessarily conscious of it being an old trope to kind of re-examine and revisit. I'm fascinated by human psychology and, consciousness and all that good stuff. And I kind of, imagined what could therapy be like in the future. And, if we could get into people's heads, how could that be used? And the holometric technology is basically, like having technology that gives you the skill to kind of see the inside of a person's brain the way they see it, kind of dig into different parts of their brain, their subconscious, their memory, and all of that. And, using that to kind of help them work through something or to kind of navigate and get information from them. Also that being an imperfect science itself, because, memory is inherently a little bit flawed. What we remember may not exactly be what transpired. And, the book kind of explores that a little bit as well. And then in the later series, you can also see how that technology could be used for, interrogating people, forcing information out of people, and kind of the dark side of that. But just sort of my interest in therapy and psychology and where that could potentially go and how powerful that could be.
Ooh, it sounds like Amira gets evil.
She has to make some tough choices. We'll put it that way.
She is dark.
Yeah. I'm here for it, by the way. Revisiting old tropes and looking at them in a new way. I'm down for, like, I'm an advocate. This is one of my soapboxes, right? There's nothing wrong with tropes. Tropes are a language that speaks about a certain concept. They exist in every form of literature. They exist in movies. They exist in poetry. They're everywhere, right? How you write it, right? What take you bring to it, what new angle you can put on it. That's where the cool stuff is, right?
Yeah.
So I'm totally down for that.
Right. How do you make it fresh and exciting and different? Because, yeah, I mean, tropes
Exactly.
are there for a reason. I mean, they work, and kind of the same with a lot of plot cliches. People hating each other and then becoming friends throughout the story. I mean, they work because they're emotionally effective. And I think there
Yes.
was one trope that I was kind of conscious of wanting to, re-examine and frame in a different way, and that was the human cloning element of the story.
Yes.
Because yeah, like I mean, cloning has been in sci-fi for a long time, and it's always framed in a very negative way, like something we should not do,
Yes.
and that's playing God, and either the clones are going to come out evil or something's going to go horribly wrong. And I wanted to tell a cloning story where cloning isn't inherently an awful idea. The conflict kind of comes from people having an irrational fear of human cloning, and that's the religious compounds and the New Age movement and all that, all these different forces like who are convinced that it can't happen and trying to sabotage this cloning project that Amir is on.
I really appreciate that. The most recent story that I read that was about cloning was the Mad Atom Trilogy
Mm-hmm.
by Margaret Atwood.
Yep.
And it too is full of, we're going to have people cloning like human lungs inside pigs, and then the pigs are going to get sentient, and then they're going to take over. And, like, and to me, I find it frustrating because this represents a fundamental misunderstanding of how the science works.
Right.
Right? It doesn't have to be like that.
Right. And it could have dangerous implications, I think, to have those ideas out there, because at some point we are going to successfully clone people, and people who derive from human cloning could be discriminated against, right? Perceived as fundamentally
Yes.
different, not having a soul, being evil or something. And there's no scientific basis for believing that. I mean, so
None.
yeah, I wanted to have a different
Twins
kind.
are clones. Right? If
Right.
somebody is unfamiliar with the science, twins are clones. Identical twins are clones. Nature does that. It's part of the way nature has worked forever. It is the concern about the discrimination or the rights of people who were cloned in the future that we should be concerned with. Not they're going to turn, into like, the Antichrist and go destroy everything.
Exactly. Yeah, and I think part of why that comes about isn't like any maliciousness on the part of the author. It's like part of telling a sci-fi story. You got to have conflict. You got to have tension. If things go
Agreed.
if things go wrong, if everything goes right in a novel, then something is horribly wrong, right? You'll have a very interesting read. But yeah, like finding a different way to explore that trope and find conflict in different areas, I think is fun to do as an author.
So, what shows or movies do you suggest if people are interested in watching movies about clones? I mean, you definitely have an opinion on this, so there's got to be some movies or TV shows that you think do clones well.
Oh, man.
Uh-oh. I guess not.
If there is a book that you want to read and it has not been written yet, you must be the one to write it, comes to mind.
Right.
Maybe the reason why she wrote the book is because the answer is none.
Yeah, I think that was, I'm trying to think of a TV show that, I have seen shows that do cloning. I'm trying to think of one that did it in a way that I really liked or was different. And there probably is one, but it's not coming to mind. I did read a book, and again, the name is completely escaping me, that had a kind of, matriarchal planet. And it also had human cloning there. Like, they kind of cloned each other. And so you'd have like a number of people who all looked the same. And it was kind of a very benign thing. Like it was there, but it wasn't a big deal, and it wasn't pathologized in a big way. And I thought that was really interesting. Yeah, I'm trying to remember the name of that book, and I can't.
The ones that I always think of, well, Star Wars, because Star Wars has clones. And can't really tell you if that's like, if Star Wars has a positive or a negative take on it. It's just kind of there, I think.
Yeah.
No, its take is negative if you know the behind the scenes lore. Yeah, because how it's done is with Sith technology, right? And clones either lack the lifespan that naturally born people have, right? Or, like their system breaks down faster, right? Or there's something corrupted in the process. If they don't have that disadvantage, then usually it means that, they're tainted with the dark side. So they have a negative view. I'm sorry. What was that one? What the hell? Cameron Hurley? Didn't she write a space opera that was all about that? Like her people were clones mostly?
I don't know.
And Gender was not a
She's
thing?
one of those authors who's like super high on my list to read, and I never quite get to reading her. I'm like, ugh.
You know, while you guys were talking, I actually thought of the show that I like that covers human cloning, and it's Orphan Black. Have you seen that one?
Ah, yes.
I
No,
have
but
not.
one of our former guests, Malka Older, is writing the books for it.
Oh, awesome.
Nice.
Check out Nadia
That-
if you've not heard of it. Serial Box has like continued the story where the show left off.
Oh, excellent. I definitely need that in my life, so I'm noting that right now. But that's a really good show that I don't want to give too much of the plot away, but you have a number of people who discover that they're clones and they find each other's clones, and there's someone obviously trying to get rid of them, and there's a whole conspiracy around how they were created and all of that. But it is like a good psychological kind of thriller with plenty of conflict. But again, like the clones are revealed to not be any different from anybody else. They have some health problems, but they're not inherently evil or trying to take over the world. So that would be a good, what I would call, contrarian take on human cloning. Orphan Black.
Okay, cool.
Okay, I'll have to check it out. Honestly, I think Mad Atom is worth reading, right? Even though it has this negative attitude about cloning in general, it does bring up a lot of important ethical issues, especially in regards to how corporations could control the technology and that they would not handle it in an ethical way. And I'm inclined to believe that that is probably true. So,
Oh yeah,
yeah, worth checking out for that reason.
I love that trilogy as well, and Margaret Atwood's writing is just so good that she can almost write any kind of
Yeah.
story, and I'll read it just for the prose. But
Yeah.
she is very good at raising complex issues and not trying to answer a question or shove it down your throat. Just make you think.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. True. All
Yeah.
that. True. All that. I agree with you completely.
So we are actually already getting close on time, believe it or not. Couple more questions.
Time flies when you're having
Yeah,
fun.
yeah, exactly. So you've already mentioned that there's going to be a sequel, right? So there's going to be 2 sequels?
That's the plan. Yes, making it a trilogy.
Nice. Okay. I'm already into it. I'm already into it. This is
Yeah,
great.
and you mentioned earlier you're already writing a 4th book, so that's the beginning of another series.
Actually, that is the sequel to The Sentient that I'm working on right now. I wrote some other unrelated sci-fi novels in the meantime that hopefully you will see on bookshelves someday.
Ah, okay. Got it.
Excellent.
Yeah, I did the classic new writer thing where, asked my agent, should I start writing the whole trilogy right away? And, the advice I usually give new authors is cast your net wide, write other stories so you can, in case the first book isn't a success or it doesn't sell, you have something else to fall back on. But yeah, now I'm at the point where it's a good time to finish the trilogy, and I am very excited to continue writing it. I'm about halfway through the second book, and it's so much easier to write when you know your plot, you know your characters, you know exactly where you want to go at the end of book 3. So I'm just plowing through it.
Awesome.
I think this is going to be my last question, and while we're talking about writing, I think it fits in well here. So, reading your book, you do a great job of discussing religious philosophy stuff, science philosophy stuff, feminist philosophy stuff, but you also keep the book pretty punchy and exciting. Do you have any tips for writers that listen on how to mix that philosophy with the action and keep the story moving and exciting while mixing in those cool ideas?
Alan, that's a great question.
Thank you.
That is a very good question. I think, it's learning to kind of cover philosophy and kind of those ideas in different ways and, in different places. So, having it show up through dialogue, having characters talk through things, having it kind of just evident in the world through like your description of the settings and the cities and all that kind of stuff. And yeah, just making sure that your plot also ties into the themes that you want to get across so that you're always kind of moving the action forward in some way. And yeah, the sentient, that was a real challenge with it because I did have a lot of world building to do up front. And the beginning is kind of almost a little bit of a mystery with this, character trying to get into another character's mind, discovering that their memories have been tampered with and trying to figure out the who and the what and the why. And then after that mystery comes to a head, then it becomes a lot more actiony and more, running from bad guys and going into space and all that good stuff. And so the second half of the book is definitely faster paced, I think, than the first half. But
I would definitely agree with you on that.
Yeah, and people have had like different opinions on that,
Cool.
but yeah, just trying to do that world building in different ways through your conversations and your action.
I would agree that the second half is definitely, there's more action in the second half, but there's action in the first half too. It's not like they just sit around and talk the whole time. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
No, there's all kinds of conflict that's coming into play. I would like to say one thing that I really noticed and that I really like. I am a big advocate for the reader is smart. You don't spend a lot of time in big info dumps, right?
Mm-hmm.
You come from your character's perspective. The character tells us about the world with her perspective. Right?
Yep.
She's like, yeah, back at the compound. And you're like, what's the compound? And eventually it's explained, right? I like that. I like that a lot because it doesn't, it treats the reader like, okay, I trust you to come with me on this journey and figure it out. So I'm not going to waste your time. Right? And I'm not going to shove things down your throat, whether it's information or philosophy. And readers will respond to it, especially readers in science fiction and fantasy.
Yeah,
and I love it.
I definitely agree that I think sci-fi readers especially have the patience to have information kind of teased out to them a little bit. Like, obviously, in the first chapter or so, you want to ground them in something, right? You want to show them who the character is and what kind of world they're dealing with, but it is okay to not answer every question up front. And like you said, do the big expositionary dialogue or 3 paragraphs talking about what the compounds look like or something. It'll come later and there will be payoff later. So, and yeah, sci-fi readers know that. And I think they love world building. So, you can kind of balance it throughout the novel.
Awesome.
Great. Okay, so now comes time when we ask the question that we ask all of our guests. What gives you hope right now?
What gives me hope? Well, 2020 is over, so that's part of it. Although, 2021 is already off to a wild start. But I think the thing that gives me hope is understanding that like the arc of history is very long, and I think in general it's turning in a positive direction. What happened this week with the Capitol was frightening, but I think ultimately those people are going to become more in the minority. They're on the losing side and they know it, and that's making them angrier and a bit more dangerous in the short term. But long term, I think I have hope for the direction that society is going with embracing diversity, embracing different perspectives and different experiences. And I think ultimately we're going to go in the right direction. It's just there might be bumps on the road in the meantime. And history shows us that.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Your moment of zen.
Maybe we should call out our moment of zen.
Yeah, maybe.
It kind of is. Yeah. We'll see that Daily Show. Jon Stewart, don't sue us. All right. If I get an email from Jon Stewart, I don't even care if he's suing me. I would be super excited.
Right.
No doubt, right?
It'll also be flattering.
Oh, you noticed me? Awesome. Yeah, no doubt.
Exactly. I guess it'd be Trevor Noah now, not Jon Stewart. I don't know if they still do it. I stopped watching the Daily Show, to be honest. Not because of Trevor Noah. I just don't have time to watch it anymore. So what projects do you have coming up, Nadia, before we go?
Writing projects. So I'm working on the sequel to The Sentient right now. I have another novel that I recently finished. And I am also working on a short story that gets into nanotechnology and how that could be used in the near future. It's cool. Yeah, it's very weird and a little different from what I've written in past short stories, but I am excited to see where it goes.
Nice. Very cool. Very cool.
And where can people find you online?
Oh, yes. I have a website, www.nadiafifi.com. Pretty easy to remember. I've got a Twitter handle is @Nadoodles, and I have a Facebook author page. Just my name.
Right on.
Mm-hmm. Cool. So thank you so much for coming on. We appreciate your time.
Yeah, it was definitely a pleasure. I had a great time. This was an excellent conversation.
Absolutely.
I had a lot of fun as well. Appreciate it.
And so that was our conversation with Nadia Afifi. Diane, thoughts?
Oh, you know what? I had a lot of fun, actually. I mean, you know how it is, right? You get guests on and sometimes you have to constantly, like, pull teeth to pry information about their thought processes and what they're doing out of them. And Nadia didn't have any trouble with that, and it made the conversation so much more interesting.
Oh, yeah.
It was so cool.
I'll never forget this conversation. I did an interview on the old podcast with Scott Andrews, and if you don't know him, he's the editor with Beneath Ceaseless Skies, and he was like the best interview ever because he pretty much interviewed himself.
Yes, that's fun. I really like that because then you can go, well, wait a minute, what about this and what about that? And it gives you stuff, and then it feels, well, I do this in part so that I can talk to interesting people and learn stuff.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know?
Yeah. 100% the reason I do it right there. That's it. For sure.
She is amazing. I really love her writing, by the way. Her prose is beautiful but simple. Right? It's not difficult to follow, but it flows almost poetically. The only other writer I can think of off the top of my head that I've experienced that with is Margaret Atwood. Right? Has that same quality, yeah.
I will say, when I picked up her book, I had never heard of her before, and, we have a little bit of a relationship with Flame Tree, so they just send stuff sometimes, you know what I mean? And I was like, oh, this looks kind of interesting. I read her bio, and I was like, oh, she's an interesting background. And so I read it, and I was like, I did not expect to like this book as much as I did. I was kind of surprised.
I agree with you. I'm floored, actually. It's really good,
Yeah, I mean, usually I know what to expect because I've at least read a writer's short fiction before we interview them. You know what I mean? If nothing else. But her, I had read nothing until her novel and was just like, wow, okay, great surprise. Perfect surprise. Do you have any books that you want to talk about?
Any books that I want to... actually I do. I just, I got an Amazon gift card from my father for Christmas. So
Nice, cha-ching.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, Dad, you know me so well. Thank you. Right. So I finally invested in the physical copies of one of my favorite series, which is the Rune Spell series by my friend Sarah Berman. Right. And so I have been rereading those two, or I've started. Right. I put it down to read Nadia's book. But yeah, it's urban fantasy. I've discussed it before, and to me, it reads a lot like the Dresden Files meets American Gods, and it's good stuff. It's good stuff, and I'm really enjoying it. So yeah, the Rune Spell series. The first book in the series is called Too Weird, and that's WYRD because we're talking about Norse mythology. So yeah,
right. There's so many books. Like, if there's a heaven, it's a giant library with big comfy chairs.
Yeah, hell yes.
In my opinion. And someday I will read all these books because it's not that I don't want to. It's just that there's only so much time in the day.
That's
right?
a fact.
Gosh. So, let's see. The book I want to talk about today is called Shades Within Us, Tales of Migrations and Fractured Borders. It was edited by Susan Forrest and Lucas K. Law. And I don't have the publisher written down here for some reason, which is weird because I almost always write the publisher down. So maybe I'll have to post that later. This is an anthology about migration and many of the possible interpretations of that idea. Some of the proceeds also go to the Moods Disorder Association and Alex Community Food Center. So it was kind of like they were trying to raise money for some stuff with this. Okay, so within it, there are stories about city-states built around sustainability, illegally escaping cities to live in the wilderness, and even a story about the last defender of portals that lead to this land of evil. So it's kind of like all over the place. Science fiction, fantasy, anything in between there. The table of contents is great. It's a veritable who's who of science fiction, short fiction writers, including people like Matthew Kressel, who I'm a huge fan of, Rick Larson, Seanan McGuire, and S.L. Juan, who just won Hugo last year.
Nice.
Yeah. All excellent. And it was hard for me to choose like a couple stories to talk about here, but I'm going to choose Porque el Garosol Sayama El Grosso. That's a name of a character, so I'm not sure how that's pronounced. Anyway, it's by Rich Larson. And if you've never read Rich Larson, everyone should go read Rich Larson. He's fantastic and insanely prolific. Anyway,
Nice.
in this story, migrants cross the border into the U.S. by using portals through a netherworld,
Nice.
to get through. It's really weird, but really cool. A girl goes with her mother despite the harrowing odds of survival, and these strange creatures and other unworldly dangers lay in wait. And so it's kind of like who's going to survive and who's not going to survive. And of course, it's super sad and also politically relevant, although it might be people going the other way the next time they read a story like this.
Cool.
And then the other one I wanted to talk about is called Devouring Tongues by S.L. Juan. And like I just mentioned, she just won a Hugo for another short story. Was it the short story or the novelette? I can't remember. But in this one, she writes about the pressures of growing up in China. And in this story, the main character makes a deal with death to help her learn new languages, because she's going to the school to just learn more and more and more languages. And I guess that's one way they view themselves as marketable to get a better job.
Right.
But of course, there's a catch when she makes her deal with death. And the story explores the borderlands between life and death, and also how culture is forgotten over time. So really clever, well-written little story there. So if you like helping others, deep and meaningful fiction, and variety, definitely check this one out.
Sounds great.
Yeah, really super cool. And it was a Canadian publisher, by the way. I can remember it's Canadian, but I can't remember the name of it. God help me.
Interesting. Well, I know of at least, and have probably spoken to briefly, someone from most of the major Canadian sci-fi publishers, aside from the big five. So, just because the conference world is a small world in Canada,
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
yeah, so that's cool. That's great. I'll have to check that out. Interestingly enough, I contributed to a flash fiction anthology that was for charity about migration, and it was a science fiction, a queer science fiction anthology. So that's
I did not know that. What was the name of it?
It was Migration. It was let's see, I forget the subtitle, but that's the important part, because there's a million books called Migration. But I think type in migration queer sci-fi and you'll find it, because it was like there was a short story contest kind of deal. So, but which I didn't win, but I did contribute to the anthology. Right. Yeah, it does. It's a cool little thing. There's lots of really neat stories in there. Just, flash fiction takes on what migration means within a sci-fi context. So I like the fact that, I identify with the concept.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah.
Okay, so I guess it's time to wrap this thing up, huh? So thanks to everybody for listening. If you like what we're doing, please support us by telling your friends about us, retweet us on Twitter, go to our Facebook page and like us and follow us there. Although I'll be honest, we're mostly on Twitter. If you really, really like what we're doing, you can help us out on patreon.com/ifthisgoeson. And you can support us there. We've got a bunch of stuff going on. We had people vote to have P. Jelly Clark on, for example. We've given away books there. I've recently started doing a 5-minute book review that goes up there. I don't know how frequently I'm going to do that, but I'm going to do them as much as possible. And I recently reviewed a spy novel from the 70s. And I know you're all out there going, why would you do that, Alan? Because you talk about science fiction and fantasy and horror, but there's reasons, and you have to go listen to find out.
Awesome.
And what else am I missing? I think that's it, right?
I actually think that is it. We're at itgodp.libsyn.com.
Yes, that's where you can find all the episodes if you're listening from the web. So, all right, good night, everybody. Thanks, and see you again next time.
Have a good one, guys. Thanks for joining us.
If This Goes On, Don't Panic is edited by Alan Bailey with production by Sound Maiden. Our theme music is by Father Flamethrower, additional music by Christopher Snydrowski, and outro music by Sable Aradia. Intro by Dave Robinson. A special thanks to our guest, Nadia Afifi. Thanks for supporting us, and we'll see you again soon.